I asked a parent to keep their baby out of the pool and they called me heartless. The whole pool turned against me, but nobody knew my reason. I watched a baby stop moving in the water and not one person around me noticed. Not one. 40 people at that pool. Families, teenagers, couples, a lifeguard checking his phone at the far end. 40 sets of eyes and not a single one was on that baby except mine. And mine were on her because mine are always on the water. Because I learned 3 years ago in the worst possible way that the moment you stop watching is the moment everything ends. I was out of my chair before I finished the thought. 4 steps. Both hands under her arms. She came up out of the float ring making the confused, startled sound of a baby who does not understand what just happened. She was fine. She was completely fine. But fine right now and safe right now are two different things, and I know the distance between them better than I know almost anything else in this world. Her mother spun around from 4 feet away where she had been standing at the pool edge with her back to the water, phone in both hands, shoulders shaking with laughter at something on the screen. She saw me holding her daughter. The sound she made I will never forget. Pure terror moving through a mother's body before her brain has had time to catch up. She crossed the distance between us in 1 second and took the baby from my arms and held her so tight the baby started crying from the pressure. Then she looked at me. And the terror finished moving through her and landed somewhere else and became something harder. She turned to the pool full of people who were now watching and she said, "This woman just grabbed my baby out of the water." Every head turned toward me. Not one of them had seen the baby tilt forward. Not one of them had been watching. But every single one of them had an immediate and complete opinion about a stranger who had touched someone else's child without permission, and they were all wearing that opinion on their faces right now. I said, "She was tilting forward. I saw her from my chair and I moved." The mother said, "She was in a float. She was fine." I said, "She was not fine. She was tilting and you were not watching." The pool went completely silent. I understood immediately that I had said the wrong thing. Not the untrue thing. The wrong thing. "You were not watching" is the sentence that takes a mother who was terrified and relieved and redirects all of that into fury. It is the sentence that makes you the villain regardless of what preceded it. I watched it happen in real time on her face and on the faces of the people around us, and I could not take it back. She said, "How dare you?" I said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I just need you to know that she tilted and the water is only 18 inches, but 18 inches is enough and I need you to understand that." She said, "Who are you to tell me about my own child?" And that is the question I could not answer. Not there. Not in that moment with 40 people watching and the baby crying and the mother shaking with the specific adrenaline of someone whose worst fear had almost happened and who needed it to not have almost happened. I could not answer who I was. Because answering who I was meant saying the thing I had been protecting for 3 years from exactly this kind of moment. I went back to my chair. I picked up my book. I did not leave because leaving would have felt like something I was not willing to accept. I sat there for 40 more minutes while the pool reorganized itself around my new status as the woman who grabbed someone's baby, and I watched the water because the watching is not something I can stop regardless of what else is happening around me. The post went up before I got home. Sandra was at my door at 8 the next morning with her phone extended. Neighborhood app. The mother's post. She had written it well, I will give her that. She had written it in the specific language of a mother who had been VOE'd by a stranger, whose peaceful afternoon had been shattered, whose child had been taken from the water without consent or explanation. She had not mentioned the tilt. She had not mentioned the 4 feet of distance or the phone or the back turned to the water because she had not seen those things from where she was standing. She had seen what she had seen. 61 comments. I read enough of them to understand what I was dealing with. Heartless was the most common word. Controlling appeared 11 times. Several people who had been at the pool adding their accounts, none of which included the tilt because none of them had been watching either. A man who said he had seen the whole thing and that I had approached the woman aggressively and grabbed the child without any warning or provocation. Without any warning or provocation. Sandra said, "Tell me what actually happened." I put her phone down. I looked at my hands. And I made a decision in that moment that I have examined from every angle since and that I still do not know how to fully evaluate. I decided not to explain. Not to Sandra. Not on the app. Not to the 61 commenters or the man who had seen the whole thing from an angle that had not included the baby tilting in the water. I decided to protect Isla from a neighborhood app. Sandra said, "People are saying things about you." I said, "I know." She said, "You need to say something." I said, "I can't." She left. The expression on her face told me everything about how that answer had landed. Let me tell you about Isla. Let me tell you the thing I had been keeping inside a sealed room in my chest for 3 years, the thing I moved to this neighborhood 8 months ago specifically to outrun, the thing that had followed me here anyway because it is not the kind of thing that stays where you leave it. Isla was my daughter. She was 7 months old. She had a laugh that made every adt in the room laugh back without meaning to, completely full body, 100% committed to the joke of being alive. She had my mother's eyes and her father's ears and the specific smell of babies that I cannot encounter anywhere without my whole body responding before my mind catches up. She died in a pool. Not a large pool. Not a public pool. A small inflatable pool at a family gathering in someone's backyard, 18 inches of water, the kind of pool that nobody puts a fence around because it seems impossible that something so small could do what it did. The ADTS were 6 feet away. The conversation had been good, the laughter genuine, nobody was paying attention for 4 minutes. 4 minutes. 18 inches. 6 feet. 3 years. I know those numbers permanently. I will know them when I am old. I know them now when I sit at this pool and watch the water and track every small body near every edge because Isla made me a watcher and I will be a watcher until I stop breathing. Drowning is silent. Most people do not know this and I do not blame them for not knowing it because I did not know it either until I needed to know it and by then it was too late for knowing it to save anything. No splashing. No calling for help. 60 seconds to unconsciousness in shallow water. The ADTS 6 feet away heard nothing. We heard nothing. We were laughing at something and we heard nothing and Isla was in 18 inches of water and we heard nothing. I read everything afterward. In the hospital waiting room first and then everywhere else for 3 years. I have the statistics memorized. I have the organizations bookmarked. I have the specific guidance on infant pool safety saved in 3 different places on my phone because having it in one place felt insufficient. I became the person who knows all of this because becoming that person was the only thing available to me that functioned as action when there was no action left that could do what I actually needed it to do. The neighborhood continued shifting in the way that neighborhoods shift once a story has settled. The warmth that had been building for 8 months cooled. Slowly. In the specific quiet way that leaves nothing to push against. Nods adjusted. A gathering invitation that had been coming did not come. A woman I had spoken to regularly at the pool chose a chair on the opposite side every Saturday for 2 weeks in a row. I went back every Saturday. I sat in my spot. I watched the water. I said nothing about any of it. The Saturday of the 3rd week I was at the pool when it happened again. Different child. Different parent. A grandfather this time, older man, kind face, clearly experienced with children. He had a toddler, about 2 years old, who was playing at the edge of the shallow end while the grandfather sat in a chair 3 feet back reading a newspaper. The toddler was happy and contained and the grandfather was close and the afternoon was ordinary. Then the toddler slipped. Not into deep water. Along the edge. The specific slip of wet feet on tile that takes a small body from vertical to horizontal in under a second. The toddler went down and the momentum carried her over the edge and she went into the water face first. I was there before she went under. I had been watching. I am always watching. I had my hand under her before the grandfather had registered the sound of the slip. I lifted her out. She was coughing and scared and completely fine. The grandfather was out of his chair and beside me in 3 seconds with his hands out and I placed her in his arms and I stepped back before the pool had a chance to fully register what had happened. He looked at me. His face was doing something complicated, the specific combination of terror and gratitude and the residue of the near thing that had just occurred. He said, "Thank you." 2 words. He did not know my name or my story or what I was doing at that pool every Saturday. He did not know about the post or the 61 comments or the adjusted nods or the opposite chairs. He just said, "Thank you," and held his granddaughter and those 2 words landed somewhere in my chest that the 3 weeks of neighborhood cold shoulder had been slowly hollowing out. The pool was watching again. Some of the same people who had been there 3 weeks ago when the mother had turned and seen me holding her baby. They had seen this one differently because this one had been visible, the slip and the fall and the lift and the crying toddler now safe in her grandfather's arms. They had seen what watching looks like when the watching catches something. I went back to my chair. I sat down. I picked up my book. The mother from 3 weeks ago was there. She had come back, different day, different time, but the same pool. She had seen the whole thing with the grandfather's granddaughter. She was sitting 4 chairs down and she was looking at me with an expression that was completely different from the one she had worn when she called me heartless. She was looking at me the way you look at someone when a piece of information has just arrived that rearranges something you thought you understood. I looked back at her. I held the look for 1 moment. Then I went back to my book. She was at my chair 10 minutes later. She sat down on the edge of the lounger beside mine without asking if she could and she said, "Why do you watch like that?" And this time I answered. I told her about Isla in the same words I have used every time I have told it since. Not because I have rehearsed them but because the true version of a thing, told enough times, finds its own language and keeps it. I told her about the inflatable pool and the Sunday afternoon and the 4 minutes and the 18 inches. I told her about the 6 feet between the ADTS and the water and the conversation that had been good and the laughter that had been genuine and the silence that had followed both. I told her about the hospital and the waiting room and the specific quality of time in a waiting room when you are waiting for something you cannot bear to receive. I told her about the watching. What it is and why it started and why it will not stop. I told her that when I saw her with her phone 4 feet from her baby I was not making a judgment about her as a mother. I was responding to something in my body that has been responding to that specific configuration of variables for 3 years without asking my permission first. She did not move while I was talking. When I finished, she looked at her baby who was in a stroller beside her chair and she put her hand on the baby's foot, just rested it there, the automatic gesture of a mother confirming presence. Then she said, she tilted forward. Didn't she? I said, yes. She said, I felt it. After. I felt it when I thought about it later. I felt that she had moved in a way that was different from how she had been sitting and I told myself I was wrong. I said, you were not wrong. She looked at her baby for a long time. Then she looked at the pool. Then she looked at me. She said, I called you heartless. I said, I know. She said, I posted that and 61 people agreed with me and I did not know. I said, you could not have known. I did not tell you. She said, why didn't you tell me? That was the question I had been sitting with for 3 weeks. The question that had a complicated answer and a simple answer, and the simple answer was the true one. I said, because saying her name to strangers felt like losing her again every time. And I was trying to keep her. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, what was her name? I said, Isla. She said it back to me. Quietly. Just once. Like she was confirming she had received it correctly and was going to hold it carefully. She updated the post that evening. I did not ask her to. She sent me a message first to tell me she was going to and to ask if that was all right. I said yes. She wrote a full account. Not just a correction of the original post but everything I had told her, the inflatable pool, the 4 minutes, the watching, why I had not explained at the pool and why I was explaining now. She wrote it the way someone writes something when they want it to actually reach people rather than just correct the record. 83 people read the update in the first 2 hours. I know this because she told me. By the following morning the comments had shifted completely. The word heartless did not appear in any of the new ones. But that is not the part that changed things. The post was the surface. What happened underneath it was something I had not expected and had not prepared for and that arrived in a form I could not have anticipated from the specific distance of a woman sitting in her apartment deciding whether to respond to 61 comments about her character. Parents started coming to the pool differently. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Over the following weeks. Quietly and in small ways that I noticed because I notice everything at that pool. A father who had always sat with his back to the water turned his chair. A mother who had been in the habit of scrolling her phone while her toddler played at the edge started sitting forward with her eyes up. A grandmother who brought her grandchildren every Thursday began positioning herself differently, closer to the water, more direct in her attention. Nobody said anything to me about it. Nobody came over to tell me they had read the post and changed their habits. They just changed them. Silently. In the specific way that people change when information has arrived in their bodies, not just their minds. Sandra came back on a Tuesday. She had read the updated post. She sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours and she let me talk about Isla the way I had not let myself talk about her since I moved to this neighborhood. Not the contained version. The full one. Sandra has 3 children. She listened with her whole body in the way of a mother receiving information she understands matters. When I finished she said, I want to ask you something. I said okay. She said, how many times in 8 months have you been at that pool and seen something and said nothing because you did not want to have to explain Isla? The honest answer required counting. The counting took longer than I wanted it to. I said, more times than I should have. She said, that ends now. She was right. I had been protecting Isla from the wrong things. Protecting her story from neighborhood apps and strangers and the vulnerability of the most painful thing you carry being received badly by people who do not know you. Protecting it as though it were fragile when it was the most durable thing I had. The thing that had survived everything. The thing that could go into a pool on a Saturday afternoon in a grocery store aisle in a neighborhood app comment thread and come out still intact and still true and still capable of doing something in the world. The mother organized a meeting 6 weeks after the pool incident. She booked the community room. She made flyers. She sent personal messages to 26 families from the neighborhood app. She called me 4 days before and asked if I would come and speak. I said yes before she finished the sentence. 19 parents came. I stood in front of them and I said Isla's name before I said anything else. Out loud. In a room full of people. Without apology and without the management I had been applying to it for 3 years. Then I told them everything. The inflatable pool. The Sunday afternoon. The silence. The statistics. The hospital waiting room. The watching and what it was and why it would not stop. I told them that the first time I had tried to use what I knew at this pool I had said you were not watching to a mother who was 4 feet from her baby and I had made her feel like a failure instead of giving her information she needed and the result had been 61 people calling me heartless. I told them that was my fault. Not because I had been wrong about the danger but because I had delivered the knowledge without the reason and the reason was the only part that made the knowledge receivable. The room was completely still when I finished. A woman near the back was crying without trying to hide it. A man by the window had the jaw of someone receiving information in his body. The mother who had organized the meeting was holding her baby with both arms and looking at me with an expression I had worn once and recognized completely. After I finished 7 people asked for the resources. I sent everything that night. I had it saved in 3 places. Of course I had it saved. The man from the neighborhood app who had commented that he had seen the whole thing and that I had approached aggressively sent me a message 2 days after the meeting. He said he had been at the meeting. He said he had not known. He said he had seen me lift the baby from the water and had not seen the tilt that preceded it because he had not been watching the baby before the lift. He said he was sorry for the comment. I said I understood. I meant it. Sandra asked for a photograph of Isla 3 weeks after the meeting. I brought one over. She put it on her refrigerator between a drawing her youngest had made and a magnet from a family vacation. Isla's face in the middle of an ordinary kitchen on an ordinary street in the neighborhood I had moved to for a new start. I stood in Sandra's kitchen and looked at my daughter's face on someone else's refrigerator, and I understood something that had taken 3 years and a pool and 61 comments and a grandfather saying, "Thank you," and a mother asking what was her name to arrive at fully. Isla was never meant to be kept. She was never meant to be rationed out carefully to people I had decided were ready to receive her. She was meant to be given. To the mother at the pool and the 19 parents in the community room and Sandra and the man who had commented aggressively and the father who turned his chair and the grandmother who repositioned herself on Thursdays. She was meant to be given to all of them because all of them were near water and all of them needed what she had left me. The stone in my chest is still there. I expect it to be there forever. But it is doing something different now. It is not just weight. It is not just the specific gravity of a loss that does not get lighter. It is moving. Through this neighborhood. Through a community room and a refrigerator and the bodies of 19 parents who went home and changed something. Each changed thing is Isla. Each turned chair. Each repositioned grandmother. Each phone put down at the pool edge. Each conversation between a parent and a grandparent who did not know that drowning is silent. She is in all of them now. Moving through people I will never meet, through conversations I will never hear, through the specific downstream effect of a story that was always meant to move and that I held still for 3 years in the name of a protection it never needed. The mother sent me a message last week. Her baby had just turned 1. She said she thinks about Isla every time she is near water. She said she has told every parent she knows. She said she is sorry it took her calling me heartless to make me say it. I told her it was not her fault. I told her the silence was mine. I told her that Isla deserved to be said out loud from the beginning and I had been the one keeping her quiet and that was the thing I was not going to do anymore. I still go to the pool. Same spot. Same book. The watching has not stopped and will not stop and I do not want it to stop. But I do not watch in silence anymore. When something activates the watching I say the reason first. I say I lost my daughter to shallow water and here is what I know. And then I give them everything. All of it. Without protecting any of it from anyone. Because the only thing worse than losing Isla was almost losing someone else's child because I had decided her story was too precious to spend. It is not too precious to spend. It is the most useful thing I have ever carried. The most important thing I will ever give away. Her name was Isla. She was 7 months old. She had a laugh that made every auntie in the room laugh back without meaning to. She deserved to be watched. Because of her, now everyone is.